In a recent conversation with Dionisis Demetis, my good friend and co-author, we got into a deep discussion about the difference between tactics and strategy in systems. Subsequently, I've decided to make this the topic of my next video. I will not be presenting this distinction in the conventional manner, namely about short-term versus long-term thinking, what you would find in most books on military theory or business. Instead, I approach these ideas indirectly through my critique of modern institutions, information systems, and what I term the delusion of control. Now, to be effective, a system must operate both tactically and strategically. A strategy should be the basis for delivering a variety of novel and surprising tactics which enable the system to deal advantageously with the hazards and opportunities it will face in its environment. To me, the tactics of a system is about playing the game within previously defined rules. Strategy is about shaping the game itself. This has made me deeply skeptical of the way large systems tend to behave, corporations and governments, and their belief that they can manage complexity through rigid bureaucratic planning. I agree wholeheartedly with Nietzsche here. He said, "To make plans and project designs brings with it many good sensations, and whoever had the strength to be nothing but a forger of plans his whole life long would be a very happy man. But he would occasionally have to take a rest from this activity by carrying out a plan, and then comes the vexation and sobering up." Now, I argue that modern institutions are obsessed with order, predictability, and control, but reality is far more chaotic. From my perspective, the tactics of a system assume the world is controllable. Strategy assumes it's not. With tactics, the systems look outward and uses the data it collects to formulate specific reactions to what is to them an objective environment. On the other hand, a system strategy must look inward to generate internal variety as the only way of developing newly appropriate tactics, which can then deal with the uncertain variety that appears in what is a highly subjective, ever-changing environment. As I see it, tactics are fundamentally reactive and constrained. They operate within predefined structures, rules, metrics, procedures, bureaucracies. Tactical thinking assumes observed data is meaningful and operates within fixed goals, where success is measurable. This approach presents itself as performance targets, best practices, compliance procedures, and a belief in incremental optimization. Systems that rely solely on tactics are playing the game, competing within boundaries set by others, and most importantly, are mistaking activity for control. Tactics are all about efficiency, but without autonomy. Fine when operating within a closed or limited environment, but it is a mindset that I see as narrow and ultimately self-limiting when dealing with an open, non-linear reality. To me, strategy is far more radical. I'm not just talking about long-term planning, but the ability to redefine both the system itself and the way its environment is perceived. As Ashby's law of requisite variety states, only variety can destroy variety. Strategic thinking involves questioning the rules, exploiting systemic weaknesses, refusing to accept imposed constraints, and anticipating unintended consequences. Truly powerful actors are not those systems that optimize within perceived objective data, but systems that bend, subvert themselves, or even abandon their structure to reinvent themselves. These are individual systems that thrive, not by compliance, but by independence. The key difference between tactics and strategy can be summarized as constraint versus freedom. To me, tactics are short-term, reactive, bound by rules, focused on efficiency, dependent on existing systemic structure, all the while seeking success within the game. Strategy is long-term anticipatory. It questions or reshapes the rules. It focuses on advantage and survival, is independent of systemic limits, and seeks to change or escape the game even. While teaching this topic at information systems at the LSE, I was particularly concerned with showing students how technology mostly reinforces tactical thinking, not strategic thinking. I argued that data systems encourage measurement over judgment, that metrics create the delusion of control, that organizations can become obsessed with what can be quantified. All of this leads to what I call tactical saturation, namely constant activity, endless reporting, but with no strategic direction. For strategy becomes crowded out by dashboards, key performance indicators, and algorithmic decision making. This I see as highly dangerous because it reduces human agency, particularly when AI takes humans completely out of the picture. One important aspect of my thinking is that strategy is not rigid planning. Rather, it is opportunistic adaptation. Unlike classical strategy, which assumes predictability, my version assumes the future is uncertain, systems are fragile, and disruption is constant. Strategy must involve flexibility, timing, and the exploitation of chaos, a position much closer to entrepreneurial thinking than to corporate planning. Following Nietzsche, I do not believe strategy is necessarily moral. Strategy operates in a world that is beyond good and evil. I do not frame strategy in terms of justice, fairness, or the common good. The common good isn't good, it's merely common. To me, strategy is all about survival, advantage, and outsmarting opponents. I strip away any moral language which often accompanies the usual discussion of strategy. I tend to align with Karl von Clausewitz, who defined strategy as the use of battles to achieve war aims. In conventional terms, tactics involves short-term actions, whereas strategy concerns long-term goals. I am more radical. Tactics is operating within an observed reality. Strategy is redefining that reality, a qualitative, not just a temporal distinction. From my perspective, looking at the real-world situations in business, tactics is hitting quarterly targets. Strategy is creating new markets or even disrupting an industry. In careers, tactics would involve optimizing your CV, whereas strategy is positioning yourself where the rules don't yet exist. In politics, tactics is about winning elections, whereas strategy is shaping the narrative itself. For me, tactics assumes stability. Strategy assumes instability. In a stable, closed, well-defined environment, tactics might well be enough. But in the complex, unpredictable world that I see, such tactical thinking becomes a trap. Those who rely on tactics alone become dependent on fixed systems. They lose adaptability and mistake the delusion of control for competence. Strategic thinkers accept uncertainty as normal. They exploit change and maintain their autonomy. I see a far sharper difference between tactics and strategy, one that is more unsettling than in conventional theory. Tactics is playing efficiently, but within a system that you do not control. Strategy is an a priori understanding that the system itself is unstable and positioning yourself accordingly. The ultimate divide is not between short-term and long-term thinking, but between those who obey the rules of the game and those who change them or escape them. A strategic system is one that is implementing the requisite organizational choices so that it is always in a position to make appropriate, novel, tactical responses to whatever appears in its environment. Thank you.